beyond limits. Blockchain, sustainability, and the fintech pioneering sustainable tomorrow.
Hi everyone, good morning. Lovely to see you all over here. And the last day, so an exciting topic as well. Now, I don't know how many of you have been really involved in sustainability. So first of all, I would like to do a sense check, a pulse check. I promise I will be to the point with my conversation. Now, how many of you have yourself engaged in some sort of sustainability focused business activity yet? You have. Great. How many of you have heard the word sustainability more often than anything else lately? You? Anyone else? Okay, so let me just talk about sustainable action. We know that we are facing some pressing issues, which is climate change, right? Now, does anyone know what is the major problem that we're facing today when it comes to climate? Why are we having this? The first question. Carbon emissions. You must have heard this. Everyone's talking about carbon emissions, right? Now, carbon emissions is the major problem that we're looking at, which we will come down to blockchain, how blockchain basically solves this as well. We're looking at 51 billion tons of carbon emissions that we produce every single year. 51 billion. It's important for you all to remember that number. Now, carbon emissions is a product of consumption. When you consume, you emit. And consumption is a product of spending. So you consume by spending. And spending is a product of something we call payments, correct? So you all pay whenever you're trying to consume something, you pay for it. Everything around us has been bought or a financial transaction would have happened, correct? So it is very important to get to the genesis point. So 51 billion tons of carbon emissions is the first thing. Now, the second thing we're looking at is going to be that we have 1.5 trillion tons of carbon emissions already in the atmosphere. Okay, so 51 billion tons is what we're producing. On top of that, we have 1.5 trillion already in the atmosphere that we need to eliminate. Right now, in order to eliminate the carbon emissions and also to reduce them, we require two-tiered strategy that we're looking at. First is the carbon removal, and the second one is reduction. Reduction is when your processes become more efficient, right? Now, what is happening in the world of fintech and financial services and how it basically operates is that one is you need to be able to understand where and how you're spending, one, and number two, how much you're basically emitting in terms of your carbon emissions. Now, the bigger problem that we're facing is when we're talking about carbon removal or when we're talking about carbon reduction, we need to fund projects. You must have heard of the word UN SDGs, 17 SDGs. Everyone talks about it, correct? These 17 SDGs are those SDGs that basically are focusing on different aspects where we need to fix the world. And they need funding as well. Now, over here, carbon removal plays another significant role. So in carbon removal, we have typically nature-based solutions and human-engineered solutions, the machine-based, okay? Machine-based solutions are something like a direct air capture. Has anyone heard of this before? Direct air capture. So in order to basically eliminate the carbon from the atmosphere, we have huge, fans that have been built. They're called DACs, direct air capture. They basically suck the air from the atmosphere and they basically eliminate the carbon emissions from that specific, air that they basically took in. Now, simultaneously, you have nature-based solutions where you basically plant trees, right? When you plant trees, you must have heard of this, it basically eliminates the carbon emissions as well. It sucks the carbon emissions. Now, while we're doing all of this, there's a major problem. Carbon credits is something that we all rely on. We buy carbon credits, major organizations are buying it, and there was a major issue that was surfaced last year, I would say, that was the carbon credits are fraudulent, where you are able to sell one carbon credit multiple times, right? Now, I, as an entrepreneur myself, I never really believed too much in the space of blockchain until I myself was exposed to the use case that, listen, if I want to eliminate double counting from the system, I need to leverage blockchain. And what this does, the fundamental thing is that it eliminates one carbon credit to be sold multiple times. Okay. Now, how many of you have heard the word carbon credit before? It's important for me to understand too. Carbon credits, fantastic. Now, one of the things that we have seen is that, as I mentioned, one carbon credit being sold multiple times, you don't know where it's coming from, and you don't even know if the money is going towards the right project that you had actually bought the carbon credit for. That is why what is happening today is, one, on the side of understanding how much carbon emission you produce as an organization. One. Number two, the use of blockchain that we have seen so far, which is surfacing, is that the reporting that you're doing today when it comes to carbon emissions is not fraudulent either. So if you are claiming that you have had ABC or XYZ or X amount of carbon emissions that you had produced, you also want to know that this is credible. Again, the use of blockchain comes into play, that no organization is actually lying, or no organization is making false claims on how much carbon emissions they have produced. Because every organization would say, hey, I have produced less. The second thing is that when it comes to carbon emissions, offsetting, buying carbon credits, organizations that are buying carbon credits also want to ensure that if they are buying a carbon credit, it's potentially on a ledger that is transparent, that is trustworthy, and that is credible. Again, the role of blockchain comes into play when the ledger is enabled. Then the third piece is going to be, once the credits have been retired. So what is a retirement? So when you buy a carbon credit, it's an active credit which you can trade. But when you basically retire a carbon credit, it goes off the secondary market, which means it is no more active. It cannot be traded anymore. But what is the proof that it's off the market? So once you retire it and it's off the market, potentially if it's on the chain, then what happens over here is that, again, you are sure that this carbon credit has been retired and it cannot be sold again. So it's on the ledger. And third thing is that if the money is going towards the right project, then what is the surety the money has been received by that project? Again, blockchain's roles come into play, that the money has been remitted to that specific project. And the last piece is that project utilizing the funds in the right way. So if you look at it, personally speaking, I was never involved into blockchain as much as I am now today, right? My technology platform, potentially independently, is all built on the chain. I had to convert it completely on the chain. So typically, these are the fundamental roles that we see of blockchain further revolutionizing the way we are basically enabling sustainable action. Now, what is going to happen? I'm going to open the floor for any questions as well, so I'm going to be to the point. What are the use cases that we see in terms of companies? Now, for example, the first thing that we're doing is carbon accounting companies. Do you know what carbon accounting is? Okay, so carbon accounting typically is when an organization is trying to calculate their scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 emissions. Okay? Now, once they're basically calculating scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, they also want to ensure that this specific data is credible. Potentially, most of the carbon accounting companies are leveraging blockchain over here. Then the second piece that we look over here is when an organization would like to offset, they potentially go to two players right now. One is they buy carbon credits via an exchange. So you go to an exchange, like you go to a crypto exchange and you buy carbon credits, right? And there are carbon exchanges. For example, in Abu Dhabi, we have Air Carbon Exchange, the largest carbon credit exchange in the world, and also the only regulated carbon credit exchange as well. Then the second player people are going to are players like Flow Carbon or many others, right? Where you can actually buy carbon credits as well. Because if you go to an exchange will give you minimum 1,000 tons, which is expensive to buy. But there are other players who will basically sell you 1 carbon credit, 2 carbon credits, and 3 carbon credits as well, right? Then after that, the use case that we see is going to be the KYC and onboarding of projects, again on chain. You want to ensure that these are credible projects that you're onboarding. And the last piece, again, is going to be that the remittance rails, the money rails that you see for these players who are basically funding their projects as well, you want to ensure that they are being end-to-end, I'll repeat myself, going towards from point A of basically calculation and point Z of ensuring that the impact has been done. So typically, this is what we see when it comes to the role of blockchain, at least at this point of time, in revolutionizing the space, because this is a major problem that we have seen, double counting of carbon credits, and how blockchain is going to be addressing this piece. Now, if you all have any questions, if anyone does have any questions, please let me know. Yes. Rav is the most active person I can see.
So it's great, like when you talk about blockchain sustainability and with regards to the carbon credits. If I want to talk about something it's been happening over the years at World Economic Forum's, a Davos event.
Yeah.
Not specific to the companies. I'm actually pointing out to how alternate high net worth individuals are flying with the private jets, and they're talking about the carbon credit system. And this is where the inequality, which is the contradiction to the SDGs, comes into play. If I'm a rich guy, I'm going to go and buy somebody who have credits, and he wouldn't be able to travel if I buy them, and I will be able to travel. So how do you think that we can solve this issue? And is there a way that we can actually bring equality for everyone when you talk about carbon credits?
So I'll basically address this point. This is a very normal conversation we have everywhere, that carbon credits could be potentially a source of polluting and licensed to go out and pollute. So you can travel as much as you want, you can pollute as much as you want. And if you buy carbon credits, khalas. Khalas means finish in Arabic. It's like, khalas, you're all good to go. Like, that's it. You can pollute as much as you want. But you see, a lot of industries, Prav, are not going to be, you cannot shut the business today in order to become net zero. That's why you call it the transition era, where you are going to transition into an era where most of these industries are going to be impacted. But that cannot happen overnight. So imagine if you have to travel tomorrow, and you have to travel. So what is the best method you would take? You would take an airline, potentially, right? And the second thing we need to do is, when you mentioned the rich people are traveling, there's something known. For example, Bill Gates is a good example for that. He is the biggest proponent of climate change. He talks about sustainability, but at the same time, he takes private jets. But how does he basically offset this? Right? There's a cost to it. There's something known as green premium. Green premium is that when we all as individuals are willing to pay an extra cost for something green. So for example, you have hydrogen fuel. Hydrogen fuel is expensive than normal fuel. So we also know for a fact that he's one of the biggest buyers of hydrogen fuel, and he has invested into companies in hydrogen fuel. Simultaneously, one of the most difficult industries to basically make net zero is airlines, because you need the fuel that we're basically using today. You cannot convert this huge infrastructure of airplanes to become net zero by 10 years or 15 years. This is easily by 2050, 2060, we'll be achieving that point, right? So some industries would not change that easily, and they will continue to pollute. But that is why, remember I mentioned 1.5 trillion? 1.5 trillion tons that we have to remove from the atmosphere. And from 51 billion tons, in fact, of carbon emissions that we have, 20% is always going to be carbon removal. where you have no other choice but to remove it from the atmosphere. But in terms of the efficiency that we can bring, even if an airline becomes more efficient next year, or even if a steel company becomes efficient next year, they will still be producing something. And that needs to be offsetted. That is where the carbon credits come into play. So that's how I see it. We do criticize, yes. There should be better ways, yes. But the transition is certainly going to be a great transition, which is an opportunity for everyone around, right? Which is a business commercial opportunity. It makes money. Trust me, right? So as long as you see the opportunity, because once we had the industrialization era, correct? Where everything, what we see around us is the era of industrialization. It's a product of that. Now we are seeing an era of the green economy, the net zero economy. Everything you see around you is going to be impacted. Every single thing. So therefore, the commercial opportunities are across the board. Thank you.